The conference room smelled wrong to David Reed. 3 months of digital conversations had not prepared him for the actual scent of 12 different alien species packed into one space. Some smelled like copper and rain. Others carried the thick musk of predators. A few had no smell at all, which bothered him more than the strong odors. David sat with his hands folded on the table, while Ambassador Drath of the Krellian Empire circled behind him. The reptilian alien moved with the deliberate grace of something that had never known fear. His scales caught the overhead lights and threw back colors that hurt human eyes. "Your dental structure is fascinating," Drath said, his translator rendering the words in perfect English. "Flat molars, wide grinding surfaces, classic herbivore adaptations." Rita Hayes shifted in her seat beside David. Her military training screamed at her to respond to the veiled insult, but she kept her expression neutral. On David's other side, Dr. Alan Parks scrolled through data on his tablet, his jaw clenched tight. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. 12 elevated platforms arranged in a circle, each holding a different species representative. Humans sat at ground level, literally looking up at their judges. David had noticed this detail immediately. Everything about this room was designed to establish hierarchy. "We have completed our biological analysis of your species," announced Council Speaker Thrix, a towering being made of what looked like living crystal. "The evidence is clear. Humans are classified as herbivorous gatherers. Your forward-facing eyes suggest foraging behavior rather than predation. Your digestive system is lengthy, designed for plant matter processing. Your muscle structure indicates endurance rather than explosive hunting capability." David remained silent. He had learned long ago that diplomats who interrupted rarely won arguments. "Furthermore," Drath added, returning to his platform with a satisfied click of claws on metal, "your species shows concerning levels of aggression for herbivores. This suggests inadequate evolutionary development. Prey species that act like predators often destroy themselves." The council members murmured agreement. David noticed that most of them were clearly carnivorous. Sharp teeth, predator eyes, bodies built for violence. The few herbivorous species sat quietly in their sections, saying nothing. "For your own protection," Thrix continued, "we are offering Earth membership in the Protected Species category. This designation comes with certain benefits and responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" David asked calmly. "Resource management will fall under council oversight," a serpentine alien named Vesh explained. "Your system contains valuable minerals and biological diversity. We will ensure these resources are properly utilized for galactic benefit." "You mean you will take them?" Rita said quietly to Drath's head swiveled toward her with predatory focus. "We prefer the term manage. Protected species lack the capability to defend their assets. History shows that undefended resources attract unwanted attention. Pirates, raiders, conquerors. Surely you would prefer council protection to those alternatives." David watched the other protected species representatives. They sat with slumped shoulders and avoided eye contact. These were civilizations that had accepted this arrangement. These were people who had given up. "We request time to consult with our government," David said. "Of course," Thrix replied. "You have 48 hours to accept the Council's generous offer. We understand this is a significant decision." The unspoken threat hung in the air like smoke. Accept or face something worse. As the session ended, David gathered his papers slowly. Other delegates filed out, most ignoring the humans entirely. A few shot curious glances. One herbivorous alien, a Torvin named Quillis, paused near their table. "Do not resist," Quillis whispered, barely audible. "Species that refuse protection find themselves isolated. Trade embargoes, travel restrictions. Sometimes accidents happen to stubborn worlds. Accept the terms. Survival is better than pride." The Torvin shuffled away before David could respond. Rita waited until they were alone in the corridor before speaking. "They're threatening us. This whole thing is a protection racket dressed up as galactic law." "Yes," David agreed. "And we're supposed to just accept it." Rita's voice rose slightly. "No," David said. He stopped walking and turned to face his team. We're going to challenge their classification. We're going to prove they have no idea what humans actually are. Dr. Allen looked up from his tablet. Their biological analysis was incomplete. They scanned our teeth and digestive system, but ignored our evolutionary history. They have no concept of true omnivores. Most species here are purely carnivorous or herbivorous. They literally do not understand what we are. Then we educate them, David said. How? Rita asked. They are not interested in evidence. Drath practically salivated at the thought of controlling Earth's resources. David smiled for the first time since entering the council chamber. There are old laws in the council charter. Very old laws that nobody uses anymore because protected species never challenge their classification. I spent the last 3 months reading every line of council legal code. There is a provision called the right of clarity. Any species can challenge their classification through formal demonstration. What kind of demonstration? Alan asked. The kind that proves humans are not herbivores, David replied. The kind that shows Drath and his predator friends exactly what kind of species they are dealing with. Rito grinned. I like where this is going. It will be dangerous, David warned. If we challenge and lose, we will have no negotiating position left. They will impose the harshest terms possible. And if we win? Alan asked. Then we rewrite their entire classification system, David said. And we free every species they have trapped in this protection scheme. They walked through the station corridors in silence for a moment. Around them, aliens of countless species went about their business. Some are clearly powerful. Others moved with the defeated shuffle of the dominated. 48 hours, Rita said. What do we do first? Tonight, there is a cultural feast, David said. Drath invited us personally. He wants to humiliate us in front of the other delegates. Show everyone how weak and herbivorous we are. That sounds unpleasant, Alan said. It will be, David agreed. But it will also give us a chance to observe, to understand their customs and arrogance, to let them underestimate us completely. Sun Tzu, Rita said with approval. Appear weak when you are strong. Exactly, David said. Let them think we are frightened vegetarians. Let them believe their own classification. And then, when the moment comes, we show them what humans really are. They reach their quarters, a modest section of the station designated for visiting delegations. David paused at the door. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we start preparing for the challenge. I need both of you sharp and ready. We are about to do something no protected species has done in 200 years. What is that? Alan asked. David's expression hardened with determination. We are going to fight back. Drath's private dining hall was designed to display dominance. Severed heads of extinct prey animals decorated the walls. Their glassy eyes stared down at the assembled guests with frozen terror. Rita counted 17 different species, all clearly herbivores, all mounted like trophies. Welcome, Ambassador Reed, Drath rumbled, gesturing with a clawed hand toward a low table. Please, sit with your fellow peaceful species. The seating arrangement was deliberate. Carnivorous species occupied elevated platforms where they reclined on cushions and picked at raw meat. Herbivorous and protected species sat on the floor at smaller tables, eating what looked like processed grain cakes and vegetable paste. David sat without comment. Rita and Alan followed his lead. A server approached their table with a platter of green and brown foodstuffs. Nothing on the plate looked remotely appetizing. The vegetables were wilted. The grains were dry. Meanwhile, the elevated platforms received platters of fresh kills, blood still pooling on ornate dishes. I do hope the food meets your herbivorous needs, Drath called from his platform. Several carnivorous delegates laughed. We would hate for you to feel uncomfortable. Rita picked up something that might have been a root vegetable. It tasted like dirt and sadness. Across the room, a Krellian delegate bit into what looked like a whole animal, bones crunching between massive jaws. This is a test, Alan whispered. They want to see if we complain. Then we do not give them the satisfaction, David replied quietly. Quillis sat at an adjacent table with other Torvan delegates. The herbivorous aliens ate their assigned food without expression, long since accustomed to these displays of dominance. One of them, an elderly Torvin with graying fur, leaned slightly toward David. 20 years I have endured these dinners, the old Torvin said softly. 20 years of watching them flaunt their power while we eat scraps. You're new to this. The humiliation becomes routine eventually. Does it get easier? David asked. No, the Torvin admitted. You simply stop feeling it. A commotion erupted on one of the elevated platforms. Two young Krellian officers were snarling at each other over what appeared to be a particularly choice cut of meat. Their argument escalated quickly from words to physical confrontation. The larger Krellian slashed across the smaller one's face with his claws. Blood sprayed across the platform. The smaller officer roared and lunged forward. They crashed together in a tangle of scales and claws and snapping teeth that Rita's hand moved instinctively toward her hip, where her weapon would normally rest. David caught her wrist gently. No, he said. The fight continued. Other carnivorous delegates watched with interest, but made no move to intervene. Council guards stood at their posts, completely unconcerned. Blood pooled on the platform and dripped onto the floor below. After what felt like an eternity, the larger Krellian pinned his opponent and roared victory. The smaller officer submitted, exposing his throat. The winner bit down just hard enough to establish dominance, then released him. Drath applauded. Magnificent display of natural behavior. This is what real species do. We establish hierarchy through strength. He turned his gaze to the human table. Tell me, Ambassador Reed, how do your people settle disputes? Strongly worded letters? Committee meetings? We talk first, David said calmly. We fight if talking fails. But you are herbivores, Drath said with mock confusion. Herbivores do not fight. They run. They hide. They submit. David took a bite of the terrible grain cake on his plate. He chewed slowly and swallowed before responding. Is that what you believe? That is what the evidence shows, Drath replied. Your species lacks natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no venom. Your bodies are soft. Your senses are weak. You are prey animals pretending to be something more. Around the room, other carnivorous delegates nodded agreement. The herbivorous species at the lower tables said nothing, keeping their eyes down. I have studied your history files. A serpentine delegate named Vesh added. You fight each other constantly. Wars, conflicts, violence. This is inefficient behavior for herbivores. It suggests psychological instability. Or, Alan said quietly, it suggests you do not understand what you are looking at. Vesh's head swiveled toward him. Explain. Your analysis is based on incomplete data, Alan said. You scanned our teeth and saw flat molars. But did you examine our canines? Did you study our jaw strength? Did you review our evolutionary record? We saw what we needed to see. Drath interrupted. Humans are herbivores. The Council has made this determination. Your classification is final. Unless we challenge it, David said. The room went silent. Even the ambient noise of eating and drinking stopped. Every eye turned toward the human table. Drath leaned forward on his platform. What did you say? I invoke the right of clarity, David stated clearly. Under Council Charter Section 47, subsection 12, any species may challenge their classification through formal demonstration of true nature. Thrix materialized from side entrance, the crystal being's facets catching the light. That law has not been invoked in over 200 years, but remains valid, David said. I have reviewed the charter extensively. The right of clarity is still active council law. Drath's expression shifted from amusement to something colder. You wish to challenge your classification? You wish to prove you are not herbivores? Yes, David said simply. This is foolish, Quillis whispered urgently. No protected species has ever won such a challenge. You will only make your situation worse. Drath stood on his platform, his full height impressive and threatening. Very well. If the humans wish to humiliate themselves formally, the Council will accommodate this request. We will convene tomorrow to establish the challenge parameters. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. I look forward to watching you fail, Ambassador Reed. When you do, Earth will accept protection terms with no further negotiation. Your resources will be managed by species competent to use them. Your people will learn their proper place in the galactic order. And if we succeed, David asked, Drath laughed. You will not. But if by some miracle you prove yourself something other than herbivorous prey, the Council will reclassify you accordingly. Though I cannot imagine what category would fit better than the one we have assigned. Then we have an agreement, David said. The challenge will proceed. He stood, Rita and Alan rising with him. Thank you for the meal, Ambassador Drath. It was very educational. As they walked toward the exit, Rita leaned close. That could have gone better. That went exactly as planned, David replied. Now they're overconfident. They think we are desperate and foolish. They have no idea what is coming. The elderly Torvin from the adjacent table shuffled past them in the corridor. You have courage, human. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. I hope you survive what comes next. We will do more than survive, David said. We're going to change everything. Back in their quarters, Alan pulled up files on his tablet. The Rite of Clarity challenges historically involve 3 tests: physical capability, mental capability, and something called the Trial of Nature. What is the Trial of Nature? Rita asked. A demonstration of true species essence, Alan read. Each challenger must prove their fundamental nature through action rather than words. David nodded slowly. Then we need to prepare carefully. We get one chance at this. If we fail, Earth becomes a resource colony for the next 1,000 years. No pressure, Rita said dryly. Tomorrow they will establish the challenge format, David said. Tonight we plan. We have 48 hours before the deadline expires. We use every second. He looked at his team, seeing determination in their eyes. The Council thinks humans are weak vegetarians. Let them keep thinking that. When the time comes, we show them the truth. The Council chamber filled with delegates from across the station. Word had spread about the human challenge. Species that had not attended regular sessions in years suddenly found reasons to observe. The gallery seats overflowed with curious onlookers. David stood at the center of the chamber floor. Rita and Alan flanked him, both wearing formal diplomatic attire that concealed their tension. Above them, the 12 council platforms loomed like judgment itself. The human delegation has invoked the Rite of Clarity, Thrix announced, the crystal being's voice resonating through the space. This is a formal challenge to their species classification. Does the delegation understand the terms? We do, David confirmed. Drath descended from his platform, moving with predatory grace. The challenge will consist of 3 trials. First, a test of physical capability. Second, a test of mental capability. Third, the trial of nature, where you will demonstrate your true essence as a species. We accept these terms, David said. Excellent, Drath said. Let us begin immediately. For the physical trial, you will face one of our warriors in a test of strength. Choose your champion. Rita stepped forward without hesitation. I will represent humanity. A massive Krellian warrior emerged from side entrance. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales and corded muscle. His claws scraped the floor as he walked. Beside him, Rita looked small and fragile. The test is simple, Drath explained. Physical endurance and strength. You will both grip a pressure bar. The bar will increase resistance gradually. Whoever releases first loses. They brought out a device that looked like a thick metal rod with sensors embedded along its length. The Krellian warrior grabbed one end with a clawed hand. Rita took the other end in both hands. Begin, Thrix commanded. He first. Nothing seemed to happen. Then Rita's arms began to shake. The Krellian warrior held steady, barely straining. The pressure increased. Rita's face reddened with effort. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The Krellian smiled, showing all his teeth, but Rita did not let go. Her military training kicked in. She had endured worse than this in boot camp. She had held positions under fire while her muscles screamed. She knew pain. She knew how to push through it. The pressure increased again. The Krellian's smile faded slightly. His arm trembled. Rita's entire body shook with effort, but her grip remained firm. Impressive for a herbivore, Drath commented, but ultimately futile. The pressure climbed higher. Rita's vision blurred. Her hands felt like they were being crushed in a vice. The Krellian warrior's breathing became labored. His scales rippled with the strain. Finally, Rita's hand slipped. She released the bar and staggered backward, gasping. The Krellian warrior held on for 3 more seconds before releasing with a triumphant roar. The physical trial goes to the Krellian Empire, Thrix announced. Drath supporters cheered. The herbivorous delegates in the gallery sat in disappointed silence. David helped Rita back to their position, his expression unchanged. "You did well," he said quietly. "I lost," Rita replied, frustration clear in her voice. "You lasted longer than they expected," Alan said. "Look at them. They thought you would drop immediately." Indeed, the Krellian warrior was breathing heavily and flexing his hand as if it pained him. He had expected an easy victory. Instead, he had been pushed to his limits by what he considered prey. The second trial, Thrix announced. Mental capability. Each side will present a champion to solve a complex problem. Alan stepped forward. A Trilixian scholar approached from the council platforms, a being with multiple eye stalks and tentacles that writhed with thought. They were presented with a 3-dimensional puzzle projected in holographic light. The puzzle involved routing energy through a complex network while avoiding dead zones and maximizing efficiency. It was the kind of problem that required both mathematical precision and creative thinking. The Trilixian began immediately, tentacles dancing across the holographic interface. Numbers and pathways shifted as the alien worked with practiced efficiency. Alan watched for a moment, studying the approach. Then he began his own solution. Where the Trilixian worked methodically through each connection, Alan looked at the whole system. He identified patterns. He saw shortcuts that the rigid mathematical approach missed. The Trilixian completed the puzzle in 8 minutes with an efficiency rating of 73%. Respectable by any measure. Alan finished in 6 minutes with an efficiency rating of 89%. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. A Trilixian scholar defeated by a supposed herbivore. Impossible. How? The Trilixian asked, genuinely curious rather than offended. You optimized each connection individually, Alan explained. I optimized the whole system as a network. Different approach. Humans evolved to see patterns and systems. We had to track migration patterns, weather patterns, seasonal changes. Our brains adapted to think in networks and connections. Frix's voice cut through the noise. The mental trial goes to the human delegation. We are tied, 1-to-1. Drath's expression hardened. This was not going according to his expectations. Then it comes down to the trial of nature. Tomorrow, in the arena, each side will demonstrate their true essence. I will show what a real predator is. You will show what you claim to be. Agreed, David said. What are the parameters? No parameters, Drath said. The trial of nature has no rules. You demonstrate your truth. The council judges if your demonstration proves your claim. And what exactly are we claiming? David asked. That you are not herbivores, Thrix said. What you claim to be instead remains for you to demonstrate. David nodded. Then we will see you tomorrow in the arena. As the session ended, delegates crowded the floor, all talking at once. Protected species representatives looked at the humans with something between hope and fear. Carnivorous species delegates argued among themselves about what they had witnessed. Quillis approached David as they left the chamber. You won the mental trial. That will make Drath angry. Angry Krellians are dangerous. Good, David said. I want him angry. I want him overconfident and emotional. Why? Quillis asked. Because angry opponents make mistakes, Rita said. Back in their quarters, David pulled several sealed containers from storage. Rita and Alan watched as he carefully inventoried the contents. What is all this? Alan asked. Supplies from Earth, David said. I had them sent ahead 3 weeks ago. Everything we need for tomorrow. He opened one container. Inside were packages of food, carefully preserved and sealed. Vegetables, grains, and meat. You planned this from the beginning, Rita said with dawning realization. I planned for the possibility, David corrected. I hoped diplomacy would work. but I prepared for the likelihood that it would not. The Council's classification system is too profitable for them to change it voluntarily. They needed to be forced. What exactly are you planning for tomorrow? Alan asked. David smiled. I'm going to show them what humans really are. Not herbivores. Not carnivores. Something they do not have a category for. Something that will make them rethink everything they believe about classification and power. That sounds dramatic, Rita said. It needs to be, David replied. We are not just fighting for Earth classification. We are fighting to break a system that has oppressed dozens of species for centuries. Tomorrow, in that arena, we either change everything or we lose everything. He looked at his team. Get rest. Tomorrow is going to be the most important day in human galactic history. After Rita and Alan left for their rooms, David stood alone, looking out at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, Earth continued spinning. Billions of humans going about their lives, unaware that their future was being decided in an alien arena that he thought about his ancestors. Humans who had crossed frozen land bridges and sailed unknown oceans. Humans who had climbed mountains and crossed deserts. Humans who had looked at the impossible and said, not today. Tomorrow, he would show the galaxy what those ancestors had known. Humans were survivors, and survivors did not accept defeat, not when they could fight back. The arena was an engineering marvel, a massive biodome that could simulate environments from 100 different worlds. Today it was configured as neutral ground, a flat expanse of dirt and stone under artificial sunlight. Viewing galleries surrounded the space, packed with thousands of spectators. David had never seen so many aliens in one place. Every species on the station seemed to have sent representatives. Some came to watch the humans fail. Others came hoping to see something impossible happen. Drath entered from the opposite side of the arena, followed by handlers carrying a large containment unit. The crowd roared approval. The Krellian raised his arms, acknowledging the cheers like a champion. People of the Galactic Council, Thrix's voice boomed across the space. We gather to witness the trial of nature. Ambassador Drath of the Krellian Empire will demonstrate the nature of a true predator. Ambassador David Reed of Earth will demonstrate whatever nature he claims for humanity. Let us begin, Drath announced. His handlers opened the containment unit that a creature emerged, something like a deer but larger, with 6 legs and crystalline antlers. It was beautiful and terrified. The creature bolted the moment it saw open space, running in blind panic across the arena floor. Drath pursued. He moved with frightening speed, closing the distance in seconds. The crowd cheered as Predator chased prey in the eternal dance of nature. Drath brought the creature down with brutal efficiency, claws tearing into flesh that he held the dying animal up for all to see, then bit into its throat. Blood ran down his scales as he fed, raw and savage. The carnivorous species in the audience roared approval. The herbivorous species looked away or watched in silent horror. When Drath finished, he stood over the carcass and roared triumph. This is nature. This is what real species do. We hunt. We kill. We feed. He turned to face David across the arena floor. Now show us your nature, herbivore. Show us your plants and your weakness. David walked to the center of the arena alone. He carried a simple pack and nothing else. The crowd quieted, curious despite their certainty of what would come. They expected him to harvest some plant, perhaps prepare a salad. It would be anticlimactic after Drath's display. David knelt and opened his pack. He removed several items with deliberate care. Stones, kindling, a small metal container. He arranged them methodically while the audience murmured confusion. What is he doing? Someone asked from the gallery. David struck flint against steel. Sparks flew. The kindling caught. Within moments, he had a small fire burning. The crowd's murmur became exclamations of surprise. Many species in the audience had never seen fire used this way. Their civilizations had developed technology that bypassed this primitive stage. Fire was something that destroyed forests and ships. It was not something you created deliberately and controlled. Some species in the herbivorous sections shrank back instinctively. Others leaned forward in fascination. David fed the fire carefully, building it to the right size. Then he reached into his pack again. He removed sealed packages and opened them one by one. Vegetables, grains, and meat preserved from Earth. He has plants and animal flesh, a delegate observed. Is this some kind of joke? David arranged stones around his fire to create a cooking surface. He placed the meat on the hot stones. The smell of cooking filled the arena. He added vegetables to cook beside the meat. He prepared both simultaneously with practiced ease. I do not understand, Drath called out. What are you doing? David looked up at him while tending his fire. I am demonstrating human nature. He let the food cook while he spoke. You called us herbivores because we eat plants. You saw our flat molars and long digestive tract and made assumptions. But you stopped looking too soon. From his pack, he removed a tablet and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the arena floor, visible to the entire audience. Images of human evolution. Umanzunting, Umansgataring, Umanskung. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, David explained, his voice carrying across the arena. We did not have your speed, Ambassador Drath. We did not have your claws or your strength. So we developed something else. Endurance. The hologram showed ancient humans running after prey animals across vast plains. We chased our prey until they collapsed from exhaustion. An animal can sprint faster than a human, but no animal can run as long as a human. We hunted by simply refusing to stop. The images shifted to show humans tracking, using tools, working together. We needed every advantage because we were not built to be predators. We made tools. We used fire. We worked in groups. We adapted. David checked his food. The meat was cooking nicely. The vegetables were tender. He continued speaking while he worked. But here is what you missed in your analysis. We also needed to survive when there was no meat. So we ate plants, seeds, roots, berries, anything that kept us alive. He removed the cooked food from the fire and arranged it on a flat stone. The smell was incredible, making mouse water across the arena regardless of species. You wanted to know human nature, David said. Our nature is adaptation. Our nature is survival. We are not herbivores or carnivores. We are omnivores. He picked up a piece of cooked meat. The bone was still attached. David bit into the flesh and chewed slowly. Then he did something that made the entire arena fall silent. He bit into the bone itself. The crack echoed across the arena like a gunshot. David's jaw muscles flexed as he crushed the bone between his teeth. He chewed the fragments and swallowed them, maintaining eye contact with Drath the entire time. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. Even carnivorous species rarely ate bones. The jaw strength required was immense. The digestive system needed to handle it was specialized. Our ancestors needed every calorie from every kill, David said calmly. Meat, marrow, bones. We crushed them all and extracted every bit of nutrition we could, because survival meant using everything available. He took a bite of vegetable next, chewing and swallowing it just as easily. And when there was no meat, we ate these. We did not prefer one over the other. We preferred whatever kept us alive. Drath stared across the arena, his confidence shaken. This was not what he had expected. This was not herbivorous weakness or carnivorous aggression. This was something else entirely. Fire, David continued, gesturing to his small control blaze. We are the only species that evolved to use fire as a tool rather than fear it as a threat. We cook our food. This makes plants more digestible. It makes meat safer. It allows us to eat things other species cannot. He stood, leaving his meal half-finished. You asked what human nature is. This is it. We take what is available and make it work. We adapt our environment instead of being limited by it. We survive in conditions that would kill other species because we refuse to accept limitations. Alan stepped forward with more data. Humans colonized every environment on Earth before we reached space. Deserts, tundra, mountains, islands, jungles. We lived in places with no natural food sources for our biology, and we survived anyway. We changed our methods. We adapted. We found a way. Rita added her own testimony. Human endurance is legendary on Earth. We run ultramarathons. We swim in freezing water. We climb mountains without oxygen. Not because we were built for it, but because we decided it is possible and then make it happen. The hologram shifted to show humans doing impossible things. Crossing deserts, swimming frozen seas, climbing vertical cliffs, running distances that would kill most animals. You wanted to classify us, David said, but we do not fit in your boxes. We are not predators who hunt for sport. We are not prey who run from danger. We are survivors who do whatever is necessary. He picked up the bone he had bitten earlier and held it up for all to see. The teeth marks were clear, deep gouges in solid bone. You called us weak vegetarians, David said quietly, but his voice carried across the arena. You were wrong about the vegetarian part. Were you also wrong about the weak part? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Drath had no answer. His entire understanding of human biology and nature had just been shattered by a demonstration of controlled fire and crushed bone. Thrix descended from the council platform. The trial of nature is complete. The council will deliberate. But David was not finished. Before you deliberate, you should know something else. You're not just judging Earth's classification today. You are judging your entire system. The council chamber reconvened within the hour. The galleries were even more packed than before. Word of David's demonstration had spread across the station like wildfire. Species that had never cared about council proceedings suddenly demanded access to observe. Thrix called for order, but the chamber remained chaotic. Council members argued among themselves. Protected species delegates whispered urgently. Carnivorous species representatives looked uncertain for the first time in centuries. The trial of nature has concluded, Thrix announced. The council must now determine if the human demonstration proved their claim of misclassification. It proved nothing, Drath declared, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. So they eat both plants and meat. So they use fire. This does not change their fundamental weakness. They still lack natural weapons. They still have no place among true predators. We never claimed to be predators in your sense, David replied. We claim to be something you do not have a category for. Adaptive omnivores. Species that survive through flexibility rather than specialization. A herbivorous delegate from the Torvin section stood. It was the elderly Torvin from the dinner, the one who had accepted 20 years of humiliation. His voice shook but carried clearly. I wish to speak about the protection system. Thrix turned to face him. This is not the appropriate forum for that discussion. When is the appropriate time? The old Torvin demanded. We have accepted your protection for generations. We accepted it because you told us we were weak. You told us we needed strong species to manage our resources and defend our worlds. He gestured toward David. But this human just demonstrated something important. Weakness is not about biology. It is about accepting limitations that others impose on you. Other protected species delegates began standing. One by one, they found their voices that a delegate from a species called a Perrine spoke next. 23 years ago, we accepted protection terms. The council told us pirates would raid our system without their oversight. But in 23 years, the only ships that took our resources were council-authorized vessels. We have been paying for protection from a threat that never existed. Quillis stood, his voice stronger than David had heard before. The Torvin homeworld produces rare minerals essential for advanced technology. Before we accepted protection, we traded these minerals freely and prospered. After protection, the council manages our exports and takes 70% of all profits. They call it management fees. We call it theft. Drath slammed his claws on his platform. These species lack the capability to defend themselves. Without our oversight, they would be conquered by worse powers. Name one, Rita said clearly. Name one species that actually threatened these worlds before the council intervened. Drath opened his mouth and closed it again. He had no answer because the answer would expose the truth. The protection system was not about protecting weak species. It was about exploiting them. The human demonstration proves a larger point, Allen said, activating his tablet to display data across the chamber. Most species in the galaxy are specialized. You're predators or prey. herbivores or carnivores. Your evolutionary paths focused you into narrow roles. But specialization creates dependency. The data showed distribution charts and evolutionary trees. Protected species are not weak. They're simply less aggressive. They evolved in environments where cooperation worked better than conflict. That does not make them inferior. It makes them different. And you exploit that difference, David said, looking directly at Drath. You take peaceful species and tell them they need warriors to survive. You take herbivores and tell them carnivores will destroy them without council intervention. You create fear to justify control. Thrix's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. These are serious accusations. They are facts, David replied, and they are relevant to our classification challenge. You classified humans as herbivores not because the evidence supported it, but because it fit your system. You saw what you wanted to see. You ignored what did not fit your predetermined categories. You turned to address the entire council. Humans are adaptive omnivores. We eat everything. We live everywhere. We use tools and fire and cooperation to overcome our biological limitations. We do not fit in your predator-prey classification because we are neither in both. Impossible, a carnivorous delegate declared. Species must be one or the other. It is the natural order. It is your order, Alan corrected, but it is not natural law. Earth has thousands of omnivorous species. Bears eat berries and fish. Pigs eat roots and small animals. Rats eat grain and meat. Omnivores are common on our world. They are rare in your galaxy, so you have no category for them. David pressed the advantage. We propose a new classification, adaptive omnivore, a category for species that survive through flexibility rather than specialization. And we propose a review of the protection system to determine which species are actually protected versus which are being exploited. The chamber exploded into argument. Council members shouted over each other. Protected species delegates demanded to be heard. Carnivorous species representatives tried to shut down the discussion. Quilla spoke over the chaos. I call for a formal vote on the review of protection classifications. Let the council decide if this system serves its stated purpose or serves other interests. Seconded, the old Torvin called out. This is unprecedented. Thrix protested. The protection system has stood for over 500 years. That does not make it right, David said. Duration does not equal justice. Review the system. Let these species present evidence of how protection has actually functioned versus how it was supposed to function. Let the truth be heard. Drath stood at his full height. This is human manipulation. They come here, challenge their classification, and now attempt to overthrow established galactic order. This is exactly why weak species need oversight. They cannot be trusted with power. We are not seeking power, David said calmly. We are seeking fairness. There's a difference. Read a step forward. I have spoken with security personnel from protected worlds. They have stories. Stories of how protection works in practice. Stories of resources taken, profits diverted, complaints ignored. Would the council like to hear these testimonies? Thrix raised crystalline hands for silence. The council will vote on two matters. First, the classification of humanity. Second, whether to conduct a formal review of the protection system. These votes will proceed immediately. The council members returned to their platforms. The voting display activated, showing 12 positions. On the matter of human classification, Thrix announced, do humans qualify for reclassification from herbivorous gatherers to a new category of adaptive omnivores? The votes appeared one by one. 7 in favor, 4 against, 1 abstention. The motion passes, Thrix declared. Humanity is reclassified as adaptive omnivores, the first species to hold this designation. Earth's membership will be granted without protection status. The protected species delegates erupted in cheers. It was the first time in council history that a species had successfully challenged their classification. On the matter of reviewing the protection system, Thrix continued. This vote was closer. 6 in favor, 5 against, 1 abstention. The motion passes by narrow margin, Thrix announced. A formal review committee will be established to examine protection classifications and their implementation. Drath's expression darkened with rage. This is a mistake. The Council has allowed these humans to undermine centuries of stable governance. There will be consequences. Is that a threat? David asked. It is a prediction, Drath replied coldly. He turned and stalked from the chamber, several other carnivorous delegates following him. As the session ended, protected species representatives surrounded the human delegation. They thanked David. They shook Rita's hand. They asked Alan questions about human evolution and adaptation. The old Torvin gripped David's arm with surprising strength. You have given us hope. For the first time in 20 years, I believe change is possible. Thank you. The hard part comes next, David warned. Drath and his allies will not accept this quietly. They have too much invested in the current system. Then we stand together, Quillis said. Other delegates nodded agreement. Back in their quarters, David's team finally allowed themselves to relax slightly. We did it, Rita said, disbelief clear in her voice. We actually did it. We started something, David corrected. Whether we finished it remains to be seen. Drath is right about one thing. There will be consequences. A message alert chimed. David read it and smiled. Earth Command is sending additional ships, scientists, diplomats, and yes, military vessels. Just in case. How do they know? Alan asked. I sent them the proposal 3 weeks ago, David admitted. I told them we would either win through diplomacy or force a confrontation. Either way, we would need support. Rito left. You planned this entire thing. I planned for multiple outcomes, David said. The best diplomats always do. But I could not have predicted it working this well. The protected species finding their voice made the difference. He looked out at the stars. The galaxy is about to change. Species that have been silent for centuries are going to start demanding answers. The Council will have to choose between reform and confrontation. What do you think they will choose? Alan asked. Both, David said. Some Council members will support reform. Others will fight it. The galaxy is about to get complicated. Good, Rita said. Complicated we can handle. Humans are excellent at complicated. Share 3 weeks after the vote. The Council station looked different. Protected species delegates walked with straight backs instead of hunched shoulders. They held meetings in public spaces rather than hiding in their quarters. They asked questions instead of accepting pronouncements. David watched from an observation deck as a Torvin delegation presented evidence to the review committee. They had documents, records, proof of how protection had functioned as exploitation. Other species were preparing similar presentations. Change happened slowly, then all at once, Rita observed, joining him at the viewport. Lincoln said that, David replied, or something close to it. How is the committee doing? Better than expected. The neutral species on the Council are genuinely interested in reform. The carnivorous bloc is fighting every step, but they are losing ground. The evidence is too clear to ignore. Alan arrived with his tablet, displaying fresh data. 6 more species have formally requested classification reviews. They want to challenge their protected status. They're using our case as precedent. Good, David said. That is exactly what should happen. A message chimed. David read it and frowned. Drath wants a private meeting. Just the 2 of us. That sounds like a trap, Rita said immediately. Probably, David agreed. But refusing would show weakness. I will meet him in a neutral location with security present. 2 hours later, David sat across from Drath in a small conference room. Council guards stood at both entrances. Everything was being recorded for the official record. You have caused considerable disruption, Ambassador Reed, Drath said without preamble. I challenged an unjust system, David replied. That is not disruption. That is reform. Drath leaned back in his chair. Do you understand what you have started? The protection system maintained order for 5 centuries. Species knew their place. Resources were managed efficiently. Now you have destabilized everything. Stability built on exploitation is not peace, David said. It is oppression with better marketing. Your species has been part of this council for less than a month, Drath continued. Yet you presume to judge systems you barely understand. You speak of justice and fairness as if they are universal constants. They are not. They're human concepts. Justice is not a human concept, David replied. Humans just happen to value it. Most species value it when they're the ones being treated unjustly. The difference is we actually try to implement it as policy rather than just complaining about it. Drath's claws tapped on the table. Let me be very clear about something. The Krellian Empire has existed for 3,000 years. We have conquered 40 systems. We command fleets that dwarf anything Earth possesses. If we chose to destroy you, we could. Yes, David agreed calmly. You probably could. The admission seemed to surprise Drath. Then why are you not afraid? Because destroying us would prove everything we have said about your system, David explained. Right now, you are losing the political battle. If you resort to violence, you lose the moral argument completely. Every neutral species would turn against you. The Council would fracture. You would trade stable exploitation for outright war. He leaned forward, and Earth would not go quietly. We are stubborn that way. You might destroy our fleets, but humans would survive somewhere. And we would spend the next 1,000 years making your empire pay for it. Humans are very good at grudges. Drath studied him for a long moment. You are not what I expected. Neither are you, David replied. You are smarter than you pretend. This whole aggressive warrior performance is calculated. But underneath it, you understand politics and power. Of course, Drath said. Stupid warriors do not build empires. They die in pointless battles. I have watched species rise and fall for 2 centuries. I know how power works. Then you know the protection system is unsustainable, David said. It worked as long as protected species believed they had no choice. But we showed them they do have choices. That knowledge cannot be erased. You can fight reform and watch the system collapse violently, or you can adapt to a new reality. Adapt, Drath repeated. Like humans. Exactly like humans, David confirmed. We lost our natural weapons in evolution. We lost our fur. We lost our speed. But we gained something better. Adaptability. The ability to change our strategies when circumstances change. Drath was silent for a moment. What are you proposing? A compromise, David said. Some species genuinely need protection. Not from pirates or raiders, but from their own inexperience with galactic politics. Let protection become what it claimed to be. Actual assistance instead of exploitation. Fair trade instead of resource theft. Partnership instead of dominance. And in return, the Krellian Empire gets to lead that reform, David explained. You become the architects of a better system instead of the defenders of a broken one. History remembers adapters as wise. It remembers resistors as obstacles. Drath's expression was unreadable. You are asking my people to give up significant profits and power. I am asking your people to invest in stability, David corrected. Short-term profits versus long-term survival. Empires that do not adapt die. You know this. Your own history proves it. This would require convincing my government, Drath said. They will not accept it easily. Then be persuasive, David replied. You have political skill. Use it. Show them the alternative is worse. Show them that leading reform is better than being crushed by it. Drath stood. I will consider what you have said. But understand something, Ambassador Reed. If this fails, if the Council descends into chaos, the Krellian Empire will respond with force. We will restore order our way. And if it succeeds, David asked, then perhaps humans are as adaptable as you claim, Drath said. He left without another word. Rita was waiting outside. How did it go? Better than expected, David said. He is considering the compromise. That is more than I hoped for. Over the following weeks, changes continued to accelerate. The review committee published preliminary findings that shocked many council members. Protection classifications had been applied inconsistently. Resource management showed clear patterns of exploitation. Species designated as protected often had capabilities that were ignored or suppressed. More surprisingly, Drath began supporting moderate reforms. He proposed restructuring protection agreements to include sunset clauses and regular reviews. He suggested profit-sharing models for resource management. He positioned himself as a voice of reasonable reform rather than absolute resistance. It was political theater, but effective theater. He is trying to salvage what he can while appearing progressive, Alan observed during one committee session. Let him, David said. As long as actual reform happens, I do not care who gets credit for it. 6 months after the vote, the council passed the Reform Protection Act. Species could still request protection, but the terms were radically different. No automatic resource management. No permanent classification. Regular reviews and renewal requirements. Profit sharing for any council-managed resources. 23 species immediately requested reclassification under the new rules. The Torvin were among the first. Earth established permanent diplomatic presence at the council station. More human ships arrived, bringing scientists and engineers and teachers. Humans began offering technical assistance to former protected species, helping them develop their own defense and resource management capabilities. David stood on the observation deck, watching human and alien crews working together on station maintenance. Rita joined him, as she often did during these quiet moments. Command wants you to return to Earth, she said. They want to debrief you about the entire experience. I know, David said. I am delaying. Why? Because this is not finished, David replied. Reform is fragile. It needs constant attention. If I leave now, everything we built could collapse. You cannot stay here forever, Rita pointed out. No, David agreed. But I can stay long enough to make sure the foundation is solid. Alan approached with news. The Perrine just launched their first independent trade mission. No council oversight. They're negotiating directly with mineral buyers. Good for them, David said. Also, Quillis was elected as the first chairman of the Reform Protection Committee. He is already planning outreach to species that might benefit from actual assistance versus exploitation. David smiled. See, it is working. Species are taking control of their own futures. That is what matters. Rita looked out at the stars. You know what I find interesting? We came here because the council thought humans were weak vegetarians. Now humans are known as the species that rewrote galactic politics. We are also still known as the species that crushes bones between our teeth, Alan added. That image really stuck with people. Good, David said. Let's stick. Let them remember that humans are not what others assume we are. Let them remember that adaptability is strength. Let them remember that accepting false classifications leads to real oppression. A young Torvin approached hesitantly. Ambassador Reed? I'm a student studying galactic politics. May I ask you a question? Of course, David said. They say you planned this entire reform from the beginning. Is that true? David considered his answer carefully. I planned to challenge our classification. I hoped it would inspire others. I did not plan a galaxy-wide reform movement. That happened because protected species were ready to demand change. They needed someone to demonstrate that change was possible. Humans happened to be in the right place at the right time. So it was luck, the student asked. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, David replied. Humans prepare by studying council law and history. The opportunity arose when we were classified incorrectly. We made the most of it. The student thanked him and left. Rita left quietly. You sound like a philosopher. Diplomacy is philosophy with better funding, David said. That night, David sent his report to Earth Command. He recommended they establish a permanent delegation and invest in building relationships with reform-protected species. He suggested cultural exchange programs and joint research initiatives. He proposed treating the council as partners rather than adversaries. He ended the report with a personal observation. Humans entered galactic politics as supposed herbivores. We leave this chapter as adaptive omnivores who change the system. Future challenges will require continued adaptability. We must remain flexible, creative, and willing to challenge assumptions, including our own. This is what makes us human. This is what makes us survivors. Weeks later, David finally agreed to return to Earth for his formal debriefing. Rita and Alan would remain at the station, continuing the work they had started on his last night. The council held a ceremonial dinner. It was different from the first dinner Giraffe had hosted. All species sat together as equals. The food was diverse, accommodating every dietary requirement. Protected species delegates sat with council members in actual conversation rather than silent submission. Drath approached David during the event. You were right about adaptation. My government has accepted the reforms. They see the long-term benefits now. I'm glad, David said. Change is easier when everyone participates willingly. Do not misunderstand, Drath added. We still disagree on many things. The Krellian Empire still believes in strength and hierarchy. We simply recognize that strength can take different forms. That is progress, David said. It is adaptation. Drath corrected with something that might have been amusement. Perhaps we learned something from humans after all. As David's ship departed the station, he looked back at the massive structure floating against the stars. Inside that station, species were learning to work together as equals. Former protected species were finding their voices. Humans were establishing themselves as thoughtful contributors to galactic civilization. They had called humans weak vegetarians.